Hello, everybody. I'm joined today by Polinkazh and Jacobin, and we're going to talk about if leftists should support Bernie Sanders.
We should support Bernie.
Let's recap the situation at this point. So, it seems like he's not going to win, but he still might, right?
Well, there's been serious evidence of voter fraud, just based off of the margin of error from the exit polls, which are supposed to be within 2 to 6%, if really 4% ideally. They've been 15% margin of errors, which is really bad. So there's clear.
They're not adding up with the. I mean, it could be that just millennials are just not voting, but I feel like if someone if they're going to bother signing a voter pledge, and they're probably going to vote, and if it doesn't add up to polls for the voter pledge,
that's what the margin of error is for, right? But the margin of error is so off. We're literally seeing plus 15% margin of error for Biden, minus 15% margin of error for Bernie Sanders. And it's just it's very clear.
I don't understand how it's happening because, for example, in the Massachusetts primary in 2016, Bernie got 49%, Hillary got 51%, and now in the Massachusetts primary this year, Biden got 75% and Bernie got 25%. I don't understand how that happens, honestly, especially how energetic Bernie's base is. It's are the people, they're just not voting, or what's going on with this shit? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Even mathematically, it just doesn't.
I actually think more millennials are turning out to vote Sanders this time than last time.
Yeah.
Last time he didn't really have a chance. Now he has a chance, but he might still not actually get the nomination.
I think that Biden has been getting a lot more sympathy from black voters than Clinton did, because the Clintons have been known for their racism. So I think that in the last primary, the black voter base was more likely to vote Sanders, but this time around, for some reason, around the black belt states, they've all been voting Biden.
But also the Bernie people have been trying to organize the workers and trying to actually organize salt of the earth, working class, poor people. The bulk of voters are not going to come from the universities. You know
Besides, the universities, they're going to vote for Bernie anyway, I would say.
Yeah, exactly.
There wasn't enough work being done in working class neighborhoods, especially black working class neighborhoods, and they're voting. A lot of them are voting Biden just because Biden was Obama's VP, or they just I mean, I've heard from some people that they literally just feel bad for him. So it's all out of pity, or just because he was Obama's VP.
Well, I think most people probably vote for Biden because it's the same with Hillary. Nobody liked Hillary and nobody likes Biden. It's just that they want a Democrat and they don't want Bernie because they think Bernie is some far left socialist, communist, Marxist, whatever.
Well, they're red baiting the shit out of him, really hard.
That's not entirely true, because I think that generally speaking, people like Joe Biden a lot more than they like Hillary Clinton.
At least they don't dislike him as fiercely, as intensely as Hillary, because Hillary was really actively hated by a lot of people.
I feel if people just watch the fucking corn pop video, I feel if that was streamed throughout the entire United States population, that the amount of
yeah
would go down significantly.
Just look at any of his interviews where
the guy's simply incoherent.
Yeah, he's incoherent and he's a pathological liar. And he's been lying, and it's not even he's been lying lately. He's been lying since the beginning of his career. I mean, he recently said in an interview that he voted for the Iraq war to stop a potential war. And he said that he was not convinced that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, even though back when he voted for the Iraq war, he said that there was absolute evidence that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. He said it was a proven thing. So the dude's a liar. Anybody who pays attention to his politics knows that. But the problem is all of these older Gen X and Boomer voters, they haven't actually most of them literally made the decision within 48 hours of voting. They hadn't even made up their mind about which candidate they're going to vote for until they'll walk into the voting booth and just be oh well, I heard that this Sanders guy is a communist, so I'm just going to vote the lesser evil.
Yeah, I just find it strange that obviously New Hampshire was the first primary state and everything, and Buttigieg gets 25%. Sanders gets like 26.1%. Like Pete just came out of fucking left field and just gained a shitload of votes and then just dropped.
Obviously, it was on purpose. Like, a lot of these people were just supposed to, like, cut into Bernie's votes.
Personally, I think that the DNC was kind of betting on Buttigieg, but then when they saw like how poorly he did against Sanders, ultimately, they're like, okay, fuck Buttigieg, we're going back to the original guy that we were going for.
I mean, it was basically like this wrecker candidate, because wasn't he like gay and a veteran, and like they use all these candidates like, okay, let's get a gay candidate and a female candidate and like a black candidate and all these, like, let's try to split the progressives as much as possible. Like,
well, they tried Kamala Harris, black female, but then everyone found out that she's a fucking pig prosecutor, and then nobody fucking wanted her, so that fell out pretty quickly. I think Warren probably did the most damage out of all of them because it split the progressive vote, and then she drops out of the race.
Exactly.
She should have dropped out much sooner. If she dropped out,
she was the last one to drop out. She was the last one to drop out. Besides,
fucking doesn't even endorse Bernie. She just sits there like, oh well, I said I care about universal health care, but I don't really give a shit. I don't want to vote for this fucking communist guy.
When you look at Warren's politics over the entire primaries, she goes from like backing up Sanders and like obviously trying to garner support from the Sanders group, and then all of a sudden, one of the Democratic debates, I think it was the 11th one, maybe it was earlier than that, she just straight goes, actually, Bernie Sanders is a sexist, and like that immediately killed her voting base. Like she like lost a ton of supporters after she pulled that, but she still kept a lot of the other progressive. And then finally, once everybody else has dropped out, and until the very last moment that she could drop out, she drops out and she fucking endorses Biden. It's bad.
So the question is what? Like, should communists support Bernie Sanders? That's really like the question being posed.
All right, so let's basically explain the situation. So, obviously, Bernie Sanders is not gonna, like, fundamentally fix the problems of American capitalism or anything. He's gonna maybe get some reforms passed. So people, there's some people who like really romanticize Bernie, and they think like if Bernie gets elected, then the U.S. is gonna become like some kind of social democratic paradise. But it's no.
Yeah, no, obviously that's not the case.
It's just gonna be capitalism, but you're gonna slap like a smiley face on it and whatever. But what actual good reason would there be to support Bernie? Let's start with that.
I think that one reason that it's good to support Bernie Sanders is because, if anything, he has brought a lot of millennials to the radical left. And I think that the stronger his campaign becomes, the more he'll bring to the more radical side. Working with the Sanders campaign is allowing us Marxists to get a lot of these more liberal leftists closer to the radical side of politics. And I mean, like, you just look at like what Kyle Kalinske is saying, right? Like, Kyle Kalinske is saying, like, oh well, we need to, if Bernie Sanders loses, like, we're gonna march on Milwaukee, and we're gonna march on the DNC.
Jimmy Dore,
like, Jimmy Dore too.
I mean, yeah, they're gonna march on the DNC regardless, but which is good.
Yeah, exactly.
The way I see it, it's good that liberals and progressives are like organizing against the, corporate Democrat status quo, because the corporate Democrats, obviously, they're completely horrible. Even though Bernie isn't really bringing out like socialism or isn't really challenging capitalism or something, at least he has created a movement of people organizing and has moved people to the left. But that said, regarding him winning, if he actually would, like, let's assume, that he gets the nomination, and let's assume he even becomes the president. That could go two ways. If he won, and he sold out completely, like, if people thought that he was gonna bring some kind of radical change, and then he didn't, that could either make people want to go even further, or it could make people just, like, be pessimistic and apathetic and be like, oh, well, nothing works, so let's just not do anything. That's the way I look at it. Like, right now, he probably won't get the nomination. Like, I wonder what happens if he loses, if he's gonna just endorse Biden, or if he's gonna try to organize some kind of independent, like, campaign, even though that won't really have much of a chance, but at least it would allow people to still organize.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, he endorsed Clinton, which is garbage, but we'll see. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, his support of unions is significant in my opinion because a union is basically the first thought that comes into a worker's head that like actually draws out the contradiction between worker and capitalist at the most basic level. You know, that like what workers are better off like collectively bargaining with their employer than just having the employer dictate to them.
Well, yeah, but I mean, ultimately, we have to understand that like unions as they exist, at least now, are like reactionary compromiser organizations. For us, it's just like this is so clear because our union, voted Biden, right? So it's like there's that. But the point of being involved in unions as a Marxist is, you're right. The union is the first thought that a worker has when it comes to understanding the contradiction between classes and class struggle.
It's an obvious fact that people who are in unions get better salaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I also want to point out that the membership voted, and they almost voted for Trump. So it was very close. They almost voted for Trump.
Unions are not necessarily all that political. It's just that people just understand that if you're in a union, then you have better rights as a worker. That's like the most basic daily economic incentive. Like if you're unionized, you get better benefits, you get better wages, or in this country, the unions over here, they're all controlled by social democrats and reformists who'd like try to limit class struggle as much as possible. They try to hinder class struggle instead of trying to intensify it. But still, like when there was that big strike, which pretty much almost like toppled the government, it was only because the workers had a union that they were able to prevent all the wage cuts and like do all this. So even if the unions
it's the last line of defense, really.
Yeah, like if the employer wants to cut your wages and you're just one guy, well, there's not a whole lot you can do. But if you're in a union, you can strike.
I mean, the reactionary compromiser thing. I mean, it's like, on some level it's true, but on another level, like during the Red Scare, I mean, they gave the unions an ultimatum. They either said, all right, you're going to kick all the communists out of your organizations, or we're going to smash your union. And like the apolitical unionists, obviously they kicked out the communists because what the fuck else are they going to do? Look at it from both ways. Like, look at it from their perspective as just pure unionists. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was the same thing over here. Like the Social Democrats saw the communists as competition, and the government was cracking down on the communists. So the Social Democrats just ratted them out and were like, "Yeah, get rid of them." I mean, that also gets rid of competition for them.
Yeah, and let's not forget the thought law in the mid to late 1950s U.S. when they literally put anybody who even thought of communist ideas, they put them in prison. And so this also cleared out the unions even back in the 50s. And obviously the Supreme Court, after I think it was 6 years of that law being active, they were like, well, obviously this is like against the First Amendment of the Constitution.
But communists and unions is still illegal though under Taft-Hartley, so keep that in mind. If you're trying so basically in a union, I mean.
Yeah, no. So basically they tried to kill the unions by passing the thought law, but that only worked for 6 years, because it was just so blatantly anti-First Amendment. And as soon as the 6 years were up, all the political prisoners were released, and then they just went back to the unions. So then Reagan comes along, nearly 20 years later, and he's like, well, I have a better solution. We can just kind of like covertly kick all the communists out by convincing the non-communist union leaders to bust the communists.
There's all these people who would say that. I mean, even in my own video, I basically just was very critical of Bernie, and I said, like, he's not gonna change anything.
He should be.
Yeah. I wanted to combat this idea that if Bernie gets elected president, then everything's gonna be, like, radically different, as if capitalism is gonna stop being capitalism or something. Like, no, it's still capitalism.
No, of course not. The only purpose that Bernie has in presidency is to raise a mass campaign to radicalize the youth. But here's the thing is, like, ultimately, especially from how he's been behaving as of late, I mean, I don't even fucking know anymore. Just watching him in his most recent interviews and conversations, it's just like, he's being I almost think that like they kidnapped his family and they're like holding shotguns to their head and talking to Bernie like, you better not say this and you better not say that, you better play nice, and like because really like he's like, oh well, I'm friends with all the Democrats and Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump and it's all about beating Donald Trump and there's nothing else more important than beating Donald Trump, and it's just like. It's like, why are you saying this?
He doesn't want to get criticized. Like, they're gonna criticize him for, like, last time they said, oh, Hillary would have won against Trump if it wasn't for Bernie and all this. But yeah, I was very critical of Bernie because I wanted to attack this idea that if Bernie becomes president, then capitalism is somehow gonna stop being capitalism, blah, blah, blah. So I kinda just said, like, nothing's gonna change, but that needs more, explanation.
Okay, I have a question. Though I mean, like the main communist thought in terms of social democracy nowadays is because of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is a symptom that capitalism simply cannot afford social democracy anymore, right? Is that the argument, or is it just neoliberalism is just them getting away with the whole thing, basically?
I think it's a little bit of both.
So I mean, isn't it almost? It's almost accelerationist in a way. If capitalism
go for social democracy,
yeah, they can't handle the weight of it. I mean, what happens then?
You do have to take this with a grain of salt because times have changed and things aren't quite the same as they used to be. But when we look at the Russian Revolution, Kerensky Revolution, who effectively was a social democrat, right? And he won and he lost the support of the masses because he didn't actually follow through with anything. With anything.
Continued the war, didn't do land reform. He would have had to challenge the capitalists and landlords and the war profiteers, which he didn't want to do. So instead,
so the peasants remained starving. Russia remained in the World War, and the peasants rose up and joined the Bolsheviks, and that led to Kerensky's downfall. So you can kind of look at it in that way. But I think that the difference now is that back then communism wasn't so thoroughly destroyed propaganda wise.
Partially yes, but also partially no, because I mean, that was a country where everybody used to only a couple years before they worshipped the Tsar as a god on earth and
Well, yeah. Well, fine, but I'm just saying back then communism was a relatively new idea, and now it just kind of seems like some old thing that died out, right? So it's liberals are less likely to kind of turn to it as an answer because they're oh well, but we already tried that didn't work. Marx is 200 years old. They'll use all these excuses. They'll have all these rationalizations. That's why I don't think what happened with Kerensky will be quite the same as what happened with Bernie Sanders, or what will happen with Bernie Sanders. I mean at the same time, I don't know.
Well, I wanted to explain my point. So basically, I used to be so critical of him, and I used to say that if he gets elected, nothing's gonna change. And that's basically the argument. The argument is that you shouldn't support the Bernie campaign because it blurs the line of class struggle. It makes people actually believe in this liberal bullshit and makes people believe that actually Bernie is great. We're in a difficult position because we actually pretty much consider Bernie to be just this fairly unreliable, likely to sell out reformist.
I don't know. I don't think he's likely to sell out. As far as I'm aware, he doesn't have any billionaires supporting him.
No, but I mean
every other candidate does.
No, but I mean he endorsed Hillary. If he gets elected, is he gonna challenge the capitalist class, and is he gonna actually prevent wars from happening? Is he gonna actually do these things, or is he just gonna compromise with the ruling class?
Well, I mean personally, from the way that he's behaved as of late, I'm seeing him kind of turn into another Corbyn. I think he's going to fail the same way that Corbyn did, just like how Corbyn was building the mass movement and building his own mass movement, and then all of a sudden he turned into this I'm a compromiser. I think that Parliament should just get along. I'm a politician.
Yeah, he won't go after Biden. He won't actually fucking go after him. They're the corporate media is talking shit about him 24/7. He's just oh well, my friend. It's dude.
They're not your friends. And why? But still to this day, I don't understand why he is saying like that, because he obviously knows it's not the case. He obviously knows that the media does not like him.
It's because he doesn't want to split the Democrats. Like, he still thinks that he has to compromise to the right wing of the Democratic Party, and the right wing of the Democratic Party never compromises with the left wing. Never.
I mean, in other instances, like, he's been far more challenging. You know, he's literally going out there and saying that the reason why people don't have universal health care is because of the rich. Like, literally, that's what he's saying, right?
But
so it's like, I want to see it so much as like, it's as simple as like, he wants to just like keep the Democratic Party together.
I understand that of course he is more left than like Biden or Hillary or whatever, and he is like...
Yeah, no, but significantly more left. I mean, of course he's not a radical socialist.
Sure, but I'm
he's
saying
significantly more left than the corporate establishment.
Sure, but I'm saying that there's still a lot of people who, like, basically when Trump got elected, the whole narrative of the mainstream Democratic establishment, and also the even like more like younger progressive, like in Young Turks and all this, even their whole message and their whole narrative was that, okay, now we just gotta unite and to fight against Trump. Like, Trump's the big problem. While, you know, I would argue that there's no difference between Trump or Hillary. Like, it's not worth supporting Hillary against Trump is completely worthless.
Yeah, of course.
Like, you might as well just try to build something actually good instead of supporting Hillary just because she's against Trump. Same with Biden. I don't think Biden is worth supporting just because he's against Trump.
No, not at all.
But I think Bernie doesn't want to say that. Bernie would never say that. He would totally say, like, no, we have to... If Bernie doesn't become the candidate, then we gotta support Biden.
Well, it's also an issue of he's like a non-Democrat running in the Democratic Party, and the party can decide at any moment, just like, no, f this guy type thing. You know what I mean? Like they're already going to do it with the delegates, but even if he got a majority and started saying shit like that, they would just, you know, pull the plug on him, basically.
We're in this interesting position where we think Bernie can bring people more towards the left, and he would maybe have some progressive policies, but we shouldn't really expect very much, or we shouldn't rely on him.
Well, this was one of my arguments, is that at the very least, he'll protect the unions, at the very least, which is like extremely important when it comes to Marxist organizing in America, because the unions are like really, they're the only way that us Marxists can get to the working class effectively. With Donald Trump trying to destroy the unions and trying to...
He is doing that, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know. So just look up NLRB Trump. That's all. Just type in NLRB Trump into Google and you'll see. So
very true. No, yeah, he literally, quite literally banned unions from the Department of Defense.
He's actually destroying federal unions right now. They have they had no rights to begin with. If you look at the law, I think it may have been Taft-Hartley or some other federal law. So they have the federal workers can't strike by law. But he's destroying them even further than that. He's just basically taking away their right to begin with to collectively bargain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, I think that Bernie Sanders is the only guy that'll actually at least slow down the capitalist destruction, the merciless destruction of the unions by the capitalists.
Yeah, let's say, okay, he doesn't get free healthcare pass. Well, at the very least, so they'll try to expand unions to where, you know, you can organize a union and you can at least bargain with your employer to get some healthcare, a good healthcare plan. At the very least, you know, at least you can get healthcare through that means. You know what I mean? That's the baseline of defense, I would say. And he really is energizing young people. And like, I've known countless people who tell me that they've come to marxism-leninism, communism, whatever, radical socialism through Bernie, and they were radicalized through 2016, what they saw happen in the Democratic primary. So it's not an if he will radicalize them. He has.
Even as of late, like, I've seen people on my YouTube channel and my YouTube comments, liberals, who say like, oh yeah, like, I watched this video because I've been more sympathetic to like radical left ideas because what's going on in the United States right now with the elections and how like transparently fraudulent they are.
All right, so if we say that Bernie might have some progressive characteristics to him, and he has shifted people more to the left. He has actually caused people to go into activism and all this. And regardless of what Bernie himself does, like, I think we should be more focused on the actual mass movement of people who are organizing and not so much Bernie. Like, Bernie is just a guy.
Yeah, definitely.
And Bernie's probably not going to win. And when he doesn't win, there's still going to be next presidential elections after these ones. And there's once again going to be like even more pressure to have some kind of actual progressive candidate. So that movement is, that movement to go more to the left is still there. But as a counter argument to that, you then have all these people who say that you shouldn't support, progressive, like liberal reformists because they're just trying to, like scam the working class, and they're just trying to like hinder the working class movement and just try to go for compromises instead of going for actual solutions. They're just trying to fool people into voting for another Obama or another Clinton or whatever instead of actually going for a radical candidate who would actually bring change. And that is a real issue. So for that reason, we have to be in the movement, in the mass movement, but we also have to point out all the ways in which Bernie is still a liberal and still a reformist, and he's not going to change things really. It's more that he is shifting people more to the left.
Yeah, well, we're using these movements as a vehicle to further the political vanguard and gain more members and gain, popularity for socialism in general. At least socialism isn't a dirty word anymore. Of course, it's still dirty to a lot of people, but you can say
not nearly
socialism
as dirty
now.
publicly.
You can say socialism now, and people will not freak out nearly as bad as they used to, say, like 10 years ago, 5 years ago. As at least people are talking about socialism. At least people are using the word revolution. I think that's worth something.
Yeah. The way I see it is like you have these certain people who say that they don't want to touch Bernie with a 10-foot pole because they think that Bernie is just like a fraudulent liberal reformist, like who is fundamentally like reactionary. But the thing is, if you don't want to like be involved in this mass movement, then you're just cutting yourself off from the masses. In reality, you have to go in there where the masses are, and you have to talk to them, and you have to convince them of socialism. You can't just say like, oh well, they're not socialists, they're liberals, so I don't want to talk to them. I want to be in my own like little ideological purity, like echo chamber. Like, no, you have to go in there. You have to be where the masses are. Bernie is a separate thing. Of course, we don't have to count on Bernie. We just count on the masses.
Yeah. It's the same thing with like union organizing. Stalin was a union organizer, and if he's going to make it easier for us to organize unions, or at least people are talking about unions now, for what it's worth.
I feel like many millennials nowadays are so disillusioned with, like, not even disillusioned, but are not even aware of like the practicalities of a union. Definitely much less so than older generations. And I think that the Bernie Sanders movement is introducing the ideas of unions to a lot of millennial workers and left liberal workers.
Building workers' power at the basic level.
Yeah.
It's like, how many communists are like, involved in unions or whatever? I mean, it's like, you want to organize the workers? Well, that's the first step, man.
There is this big, like, ultra-left tendency to say, like, unions are reformist or unions are bad, I don't want to be in the unions. But, like, no, it's really just organizing people is difficult. Like, trying to actually deal with the masses and, like, convince them and organize them is difficult, and people don't want to deal with that. They just want to form their little ultra-left cliques and whatnot. But in reality, you have to be where the masses are. You can't just say like, oh well, the unions are controlled by Democrats, or the unions are controlled by like you said, like in your union, a lot of people even supported Trump and Biden. But I mean, you can't just surrender and say like, oh well, the workers are reactionary, I'm not going to deal with the workers. Well, like, okay.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's hard, guys. I mean, for those of you watching, it's incredibly difficult organizing, talking to people in whatever manner, especially hard, going into a plant and talking to people about, organizing and getting better benefits and wages. But, it's necessary. It's also very fulfilling when you're successful. So, that's another thing. If you're going to be a communist, you should organize the workers.
But you also have to have like realistic goals. Like people think they're just gonna march up to like you're just gonna walk into a random factory and then give people some leaflets and then everybody's gonna be instantly convinced. Like no, it doesn't work like that. Like
they're gonna be, some of them will be super supportive, but mainly gonna be apathetic or scared. Scared is probably the biggest one.
Especially the younger workers, they're going to be much more on board than the older worker, like enthusiastic at least, than the older workers.
But let's say that you're involved in your local like union branch for, let's say, even a year or a couple of years. At that, like, then people are going to start seeing you as like, okay, yeah, I guess, like, Marxism, alright, like, it's going to start becoming more normalized, but...
Respectable, yeah.
Yeah, but you have to go out and do the work. I mean, if you're just there, you talk to people like, yeah, Marxism, and then you just fucking walk away and never talk to them again unless they talk to you about Marxism. You gotta make friends with these people and actually, show that you're a real fucking person and not just like a pundit.
No, yeah, you need to make friends with them first, I would say, before you even get into the topic of radical politics, which is what we would do, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying that people, large groups of people, they become like more accustomed to, socialism through actual worker struggle. Like if it's the socialists in the union who are organizing all the union stuff, then people come to like count on them or rely on them. They don't have to actually even think to themselves like, okay, yeah, I'm now a socialist or something. It's just they sort of through their own experience they start to like trust the socialists who are actually organizing.
Yeah, and you don't even have to like name drop socialism. You could just do your thing and be really effective in the union, and then someone, say someone someday asks you like, hey, well, where do your politics fall? Just say like, yeah, I'm a socialist, and they ask you why, and you say, well, I believe in the power of the workers. That's why I'm involved in the union. I think it's important, struggling day by day to help, working class solidarity. And,
there's power in the factory.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's you're not going to see immediate results. You're going to see immediate results of what you're doing.
And the same thing goes for the Bernie thing. It's not just the unions. There's so many different avenues. There's lots of mass movements. We really should have people involved in all of them. Everybody has something they can do. If you work, then you get unionized. If you're still studying, then you do like student activism or whatever. There's all these different things like organizing against police brutality, organizing against wars, all these things to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let me also say in terms of the Bernie Sanders thing, we decided to go to the Bernie Sanders rally, in Manchester, and an NPR guy actually came up and interviewed us, which was cool. And that's the type of thing that you wouldn't be able to do if you weren't going to these things. You're just standing in line filling out a survey or something, and an NPR guy starts interviewing you, and now you're a communist talking to NPR.
Yeah, granted the NPR did just like completely take everything we said out of context, but like
yeah, it was very short and whatever.
But pretty much the only thing that they actually used from our interview was Zach saying that he wouldn't vote for any other Democrat but Bernie Sanders. Like
all he put in was just this guy's a machinist and a labor organizer, and I'm going to vote for Bernie because he supports the working class. That's pretty much all they left in. But with that being said, I think that's at least
it's a start. It's a start at the very least, right? It's just we're putting ourselves out there and we're showing, at least representing support for the workers.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm here with Polinkazh. Thank you. I'm here with Polinkazh and Jacobin. Are you actually coughing or are you just fucking with me?
He has the coronavirus.
It actually hurts to laugh. It's so bad.
We're speaking about Bernard.
Oh yeah, Bernard Sandals. Yes.
Put the microphone like away from your mouth when you're not talking, I guess.
Okay, is that better?
No, I mean when you're not talking. You put
when I'm not talking. Okay, so it was good where it is, right?
Well, we heard like really loud sounds, so not really. Just put the microphone like mute or something, and then when you want to talk.
Okay. But it sounds good right now, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fine if you just don't cough into it.
Okay.
Yeah, don't start a video and just be like, oh! You could finna die during the video.
Polinkazh final moments.
You can't even start the fucking. Jesus Christ, dude. He's gonna die.